Colonel, what's a Russian gunship doing here?
I have no idea.
Hey guys, Evan here, and thanks for your interest in this video. If you're here to listen to me talk specifically about the game, I've linked a timestamp in the description so you can skip straight to it. Because for the first several minutes of this video, I'll be setting up a lot of groundwork for the analysis itself without actually talking about the game directly. This is both to provide an entry into my mindset and to add context to the production of the game itself. So if at any time you get sick of me rambling and want to get straight into the good stuff, just hit that link and it'll take you directly into the MGS analysis. I'm happy to have you on, and thanks for watching.
Metal Gear. It can't be.
Since before mankind began recording its own history, I am certain that art has played a factor in our lives here on Earth. From cave drawings all the way to virtual reality, we have expressed ourselves and learned about one another through artistic endeavors of some kind like music, movies, books, and even comics. One might look to the Renaissance period of history to see some of the best paintings and most beautiful examples of human art from the likes of Da Vinci or Michelangelo, such as the Sistine Chapel for instance. Or perhaps one might even look back as far as the 11th century when Notre Dame was being built, or even the exquisite statues carved by the Greeks and the Romans. We as humans have always utilized art as a source of both self-expression and inspiration, and the modern era is no different. Music, movies, and of course, video games have become our modern art. We take inspiration from and feel emotion emitted by the stories of these characters and what they struggle to overcome, and then we apply it in different ways to our own lives. There is, of course, far more vapid, grotesque, soulless content being passed around these days, completely commodified and sold purely as product. And the ratio is easily 80-20, maybe worse. I'm not here to make a case that modern art is good, or even that all art has merit. The truth remains, however, that the same human spirit that laid within those artists of the past exists today within us. We are the same species, after all, with the same innate drive towards exceptionalism. Rare as it might seem today, it's always been rare, even back then. That's what makes it exceptional. Now I know what you're thinking, and no, I'm not about to compare Hideo Kojima to the likes of such artists whom I'd argue were genuinely divinely inspired like the aforementioned Da Vinci and Michelangelo. He's just a Japanese dude who made some fun video games. I'm not here to suck him off as some kind of auteur. That isn't my point. Rather, I'm making the point that in spite of what many cynics and fools may have said or continue to believe about the incessance and uselessness of video games, they remain a prevalent form of art that has gone on to inspire thousands, potentially millions in their personal lives. The same as the art of old did, when a Roman or Greek would see the statues of their heroes and think, I should be like that. We see our Superman or Kratos, Master Chief, Spider-Man, whatever. Fantastical showings of stoicism, strength, and acceptance of obligation and responsibility, the strive for greatness and perseverance in the face of extreme adversity. I can't tell you how many people I see in the gym wearing shirts of their favorite video game character, trying to be like them. They're still just video games, and as with anything, excess obsession can create a disgusting result. Replacing your own life and potential for adventure with these digital ones is, of course, a recipe for laziness and self-destruction. I would know, I've been there. They're not just meant for escapism, though. That's a temporary facet of art. They're also a means for inspiration. So what does any of that have to do with the topic of this video? Well, this franchise has been the topic of both reverence and scorn for over 2 decades now due to its intense, convoluted, and sometimes even prophetic storytelling, and top-of-the-line finely tuned satisfying gameplay coupled with a rabid, sometimes devolving into delusional fanbase. So I felt the need to touch on how I see video games as an art form for inspiration, and mention the different reactions of your average naysayer before talking about this game and its highly controversial creator. I want to show my hand here and be totally upfront before going any further. This video is going to be drenched in bias. This game for the original PlayStation was one of the first games I have a memory of playing, specifically a copy I was given by my older sister's boyfriend at the time because he didn't even like it. I was only 8 years old. This game and its subsequent sequels and prequels have been with me since I was literally a child, and as such, I had the blessing of experiencing them with no outside understanding or expectation of the creator, fanbase, or reputation. This game had a profound effect, not only on me, but on the video game industry at large. That's why this will be the longest video I've ever made. So I hope you'll join me as we take a deep dive into a retrospective analysis of There's only two reasons a video game ever gets made: passion for the art and a love of storytelling, or money. More often than not, any game you've ever played that saw mass production via a widespread release was primarily motivated by the latter, which the former serving as a byproduct only to keep the development team happy while the publisher bullies them with deadlines and forced changes to further commodify the product into a more marketable item. This is especially the case for console releases, given their necessitating of physical copies to be printed, and the development of different ports, of course. I'm not saying this to be cynical or critical of how the industry works, or even suggesting that it's unfair. I'm just saying it how it is. Products cost money. The higher quality the product is pursuing, the more money it's going to cost. This inevitably means asking someone with that money, i.e. a publisher, to stick their necks out under the promise that your product will make them their money back plus profit. This arrangement is going to guarantee that the publisher demands a say in how the product is made in order to ensure that it releases to a good reception and profitable returns. The only problem with this is that the publishers are normally artistically stupid and/or illiterate. They have money and they know business. I'm not saying that they're stupid overall. I'm suggesting that their pattern, time and time again, for ensuring profitable returns is normally to observe the trends at the time and force the product they're funding into the mold of those trends. Sadly, this works far more than it doesn't. Let's rewind back to the late 90s. The video game industry was half the size of what it is now, but twice as fresh, with double the potential for growth. The so-called console wars were still going strong, with different companies racing to have the next huge video game home console for kids and adults alike to purchase. No one benefited from this capitalistic conflict more than the consumer, since publishers were doing everything in their power to offer people something with their console that wasn't available anywhere else. People used to believe console exclusives were not consumer-friendly, but I'd argue the opposite is true for those of us who love creative and unique video game experiences. For instance, if I were an executive in charge of Sony's PlayStation project, I'd want some kind of gaming experience that no one could find on a competing platform. That is, after all, what made the N64 such a gem. Games like Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, Super Smash Bros., games that were unique to that console and couldn't be found anywhere else, made the players crave and inevitably purchase that specific console. We all know it wasn't the controller. Looking at the other games of the time available on the PS1, we do have some impressive offerings. Games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Resident Evil, Parasite Eve, and Siphon Filter were all holding down the fort, at least as far as more tonally serious, adult-oriented games went. As fun and creative as those games were, there had yet to be any kind of game that felt like playing a blockbuster movie. You had games with passionate writing and storytelling like Final Fantasy VII, but it lacked the graphical fidelity and control of something like Resident Evil, which lacked the explosive action of something like Siphon Filter. Players could bite off chunks of those feelings with games that imitated certain aspects of movies in their games, but no video game had ever managed to offer up the kind of high-stakes intensity and emotional beats of a real blockbuster movie before. This meant there was a growing desire to see video games as more than just a digital pastime. There was a market for something greater, and the answer would come not in the form of a new or original IP, but rather a continuation to an already established series, but this time with a whole new execution intended to bring what had previously been a very niche franchise to new heights. Hideo Kojima. If you play video games even passively, you've probably seen that name thrown around within the industry. The man is notorious for his style of storytelling and game direction, and his name is attached to the IP of Metal Gear so firmly that every single time the publisher has ever tried to have a game developed without his involvement, it either fails colossally, i.e. Snake's Revenge or Metal Gear Survive, or the fans petition so hard to get him back that the studio and Kojima himself eventually just acquiesce. Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid 4. Kojima was heavily involved with Revengeance, so it doesn't count. This has been the case since the first game in the franchise released. No, not that one, we're not there yet. That one. In the early to mid-80s, Kojima joined Konami to work on developing a video game to be released for the MSX home computer. Kojima and his team envisioned an action game called Metal Gear, where players could sink their teeth into some fast-paced, intense military combat, similar to Contra, where they have to find and destroy a giant bipedal tank. But the MSX was simply far too limited in its technological capability to handle what the team was trying to do, and it became very clear that Kojima wasn't going to be able to deliver the product that Konami wanted. If you're familiar with Metal Gear, you probably know this story already. The action ended up being boring and bland due to the limited amount of bullets, effects, and enemies that could be shown on screen at once before the game stopped running. Something was going to have to change. So Kojima set out to re-envision what Metal Gear was, how it would play, in a way to keep the game fun while still being feasible. This is where the idea came to have the player avoid enemies instead of attack them. Rather than finding and shooting enemies, the player would sneak around and hide to avoid being seen in order to pass through the levels. The task went from assault to espionage, and the name of the game was now Stealth. You may have heard Metal Gear credited as the first stealth game, and this is why. It's interesting to think about the fact that a mechanic so popular that it's implemented into almost every game now technically first came to exist solely due to hardware limitations. This was the case for a lot of the creativity of the time, too. Metal Gear released to great sales relative to its expectations and mountains of praise and critical acclaim. Konami had found a golden egg, and Kojima was their golden goose. Following the very successful release of Metal Gear, a sequel was immediately greenlit, but without the involvement of Kojima. Different developers were chosen to handle the production of Metal Gear's first sequel, titled Snake's Revenge, while Kojima pursued a new original point-and-click game called Snatcher. Although Snake's Revenge was received well enough, and Kojima himself has said he thought it was faithful to the spirit of the series, the lack of Kojima's presence was apparent, and the game remains one of several non-canon oddities among the franchise. Kojima would return to the franchise shortly after to direct a true sequel to Metal Gear called Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, totally ignoring the continuity set by Snake's Revenge in favor of developing the plot in a different direction under Kojima's writing, thus cementing Snake's Revenge status as non-canon to the franchise. Released in 1990, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake was also very well received by players and critics alike, praised by most as improving on the original in nearly every regard. People were thrilled with its compelling stealth-based gameplay, its rich dialogue, and its unusually layered storytelling, something that was still very unfamiliar to the average video game at the time. But Kojima and his team were still not satisfied. Although they had achieved a monumental task with the production of Metal Gear, and seemingly done the impossible by following it up with a sequel universally regarded as better than its predecessor in every way, the initial vision for Metal Gear had been scrapped and reworked in order to appease hardware limitations. The action game Kojima and his team had originally set out to make never became a reality. Kojima would once again step away from the Metal Gear franchise following Metal Gear 2's release to begin working on yet another original point-and-click adventure game titled Policenauts. While working on Policenauts, however, the technology for video game hardware was rapidly advancing, and by the time Policenauts finally released in July of 1994, Sony was just a few short months away from releasing its highly ambitious first foray into the video game console market. The Sony Playstation was set to release in December of that same year. Tasked with competing with the likes of the Atari Jaguar and 3DO, the PlayStation was soon to dominate the market. Rumors of a new Nintendo console were circulating fast, though, and Sony knew that if they were going to remain competitors, they were going to need some impressive titles for their system. Around this time, Kojima was already making plans for his new game, and his ambitions for it were high. In fact, development was already underway for the 3DO, but to Kojima's dismay, the product was abruptly discontinued in 1996, while his new game was still in the middle of its creation. This would prove to be a massive blessing, however, as now Sony's new console and Kojima's new game were set to become a match made in outer heaven. Hideo Kojima grew up watching Western action movies with his parents, and as such, formed an intimate understanding of the bond between enjoying a film with your family and the power that art has in connecting people together. Because of this, Kojima decided he wanted to make movies and contribute to the medium that had become so important to him as a child. Unfortunately, following the passing of his father, a great burden was placed on him to begin making money to take care of his family. And because of this, he gave up his dream and pursued going to college instead. This was only temporary, of course, because eventually he would land a job at Konami and go on to develop the various titles we just finished covering. His itch to create movies had not subsided, however, and he craved the kind of cinematic action and climactic storytelling he'd seen in the Western movies that he had grown up watching with his family. All of the games he had directed to this point had strokes of that action in them, but the hardware limitations that Metal Gear 1 and 2 faced, and the interactive limitations of his point-and-click titles, meant he'd never been able to fully realize his vision of telling a story through a tailored experience meant to evoke blockbuster-level reaction from his audience. Now is the time for that to change. Coupling the work experience he and his team had attained by directing his previous 4 games with a newly ambitious vision, and the exceptional new hardware of the Sony Playstation, Kojima was finally able to fulfill his initial dream, and then some, with the release of the stealth action game, Metal Gear Solid. Serving as a new entry into the Metal Gear franchise, while presenting itself as the first chapter of a whole new book rather than a continuation of the previous titles, Metal Gear Solid brought consumers the kind of interactive video game experience that they'd previously had to rely heavily on their own imaginations to supplement other titles for. And it had everything. Great voice acting, in-game rendered movie-like cinematics, 100% 3D graphics as opposed to a 2D 3D hybrid, compelling dialogue, unpredictable story, the return of stealth-based gameplay with the addition of pulse-pounding military sequences, emotional characters, crazy plot twist, socio-economic story beats, vehicle sections, big explosions, guns, bullets, blood, drama, tears, tactical, espionage, action. This game was it. There wasn't another game on the market that could even compare to how good this game was at the time. There were similar experiences, but even they were plagued by common game issues at the time like bad voice acting, poorly written plot from inexperienced writers, etc. Players just tolerated it at the time because having an interactive other world was such an awesome novelty to begin with that developers could pretty much get away with anything as long as the game was fun to play. Even games like GoldenEye or Perfect Dark on the N64 would pale utterly in comparison to what Metal Gear Solid had to offer on its 2 compact discs. Yeah, that's right, this game was so big that it couldn't even fit on a single disc, much less a cartridge. I mean, there were other games that were also big enough to warrant 2 discs, but they were more rare than you might think. The point is, when this game hit the market, it was one of a kind. Nowadays, you can just go on Steam and find 5 to 15 games exactly like whatever game you like due to just the sheer volume of output in the industry. You like Dark Souls? Well, there's 100 games just like it. So much to the point that the term Souls-like is used to describe an entire genre of game. Don't even get me started on shooters. But back then, if you liked Metal Gear Solid, the only game you could play for a similar experience was just Metal Gear Solid again. I hope you see the reason I'm saying this is to emphasize just how groundbreaking this game was at the time. Even the opening level to this game is burned into my brain. It's iconic. We get a cutscene with some beautiful operatic vocals as we're treated to a fully 3D in-engine rendered shot of our protagonist in a one-man submarine somewhere in the Bering Sea in Alaska. Throughout this shot, our mission briefing is narrated to us by Colonel Campbell, as he fills us in on why we're there, who our enemies are, and what to expect. The player is able to derive quite a bit of information from this. Newer players know that they're playing a character named Snake, and veterans of the franchise at this point would recognize that it's the titular Solid Snake from the previous game and the first game returning for this one. We also know we're taking down a terrorist cell of highly trained operatives formerly called Foxhound, now the Sons of Big Boss. This setup here might feel a little exposition heavy, but you gotta remember, this is a mission debriefing after all, which is just the real-life exposition for military operatives. Snake departs from his one-man submarine and rises through the water into one of the most iconic opening levels in video game history. I could recreate the layout of this docking area from memory with a pen and paper if asked. It's specifically designed to introduce the player to the different mechanics of the game. Well, after a lengthy codec call, of course, but we'll get to that later. Just in this little section, you can handle it in so many different ways. Kojima and his crew really managed to take the stealth aspects that made Metal Gear so beloved and bring it to a whole new level. You can just sneak past these guys or lure them around by knocking against a wall to distract them, or you can straight up murder them. Snake is a trained soldier, and he's ready for the unexpected, so you can bet if you're spotted he has the capability to employ some CQC action and faceplant these guys into that very cold pavement. That's not how you're supposed to do it though, and I don't mean supposed to from a game design perspective. They accounted for the player acting like a raging psycho and trying to kill everyone. I mean that's not how Snake operates. He's the best of the best. He's tackled numerous missions and infiltrated 2 well-fortified top-security black sites at this point. 3 if you count Snake's Revenge. No, Snake is the best of the best when it comes to infiltration missions, and he uses a different kind of tactic on his missions. The one that this game was designed around and known for. We've already covered how Kojima had originally set out to make an action game with his first title, but ended up creating a new genre by making it a stealth game simply because of hardware limitations. Well, he could have taken advantage of the PS1's hardware to make an action game like he originally wanted, but he had set a new identity for the Metal Gear brand, and so honoring that would be a first priority on Metal Gear Solid's design. The majority of this game is based around stealth mechanics, avoiding guards and surveillance cameras, spotting hidden lasers that trigger alarm systems, and employing camouflage to move around the environment, unseen. Metal Gear Solid featured game mechanics that would be revolutionary in execution even by the standards of a lot of modern titles. You have to be careful in this game or you will get spotted. There's all kinds of giveaways, from certain flooring being louder than others to cameras you might not have seen in time to dodge them. As a child playing this game and realizing that a guard would notice my footprints in the snow and track them if they went off of a normal route, my mind was blown. This was a mechanic that can actually be used to your advantage, if you need to lure a problematic guard to his untimely end, that is. Although in general the key to stealth is avoiding conflict, so maybe taking the route through the snow isn't the best idea. Is there another way? Well, of course there is, you dumb idiot. This is Metal Gear Solid. You can time out the spotlights and run past them, but wait a second, now I'm trapped and there's guards over there. Well, then you're going to have to time your movements carefully, following acute observation and pattern recognition of the guards' routes. This isn't Half-Life or Quake. You gotta think, plan, analyze your surroundings before you take any action. Now, currently you're unarmed because you couldn't bring any gear with you on this mission. It's on-site procurement only. No weapons, no equipment. All you have is a pack of cigarettes and a pair of binoculars. Less experienced players might sneak right into the base, keeping it stealthy the whole way through. Not me. Things could get ugly really fast, and my fists aren't going to do much against a dozen armed guards. Luckily, I happen to know that you can get inside of this truck to hide from a sentry, and wouldn't you know it, a spare SOCOM pistol. As a kid, I sped past this thing so many times before realizing it was even here while trying to play different styles. And following that, anytime I saw a SOCOM pistol in any other game, like COD 4 or Modern Warfare 2, I used it exclusively as my sidearm. I called it the pistol from Metal Gear. Excellent choice of handgun, Kojima. Bravo. Now, once we get inside is where the real challenge starts. We're in a garage area with a tank staring right there at us. Fortunately, there's no one in it. The challenge comes with our titular protagonist having to sneak past and avoid all of the potential snares that lie ahead between him and the DARPA chief. I'll get into it a little bit later. Our adversaries have been laid out, sentry guards and surveillance cameras, and we're expected to overcome them with tactical espionage action, i.e. stealth gameplay. As you've already seen on screen, the game has been designed with that stealth in mind. Snake can crawl around on the ground, through ventilation shafts, choke enemies, and dispose of them without going into alert status. The game also equips the player with some solid choices of equipment to diversify the ways you can tackle any given scenario, like the surveillance camera. I could sneak by it, which takes the time of watching for it to move so I can hide underneath it and waiting for it to move again just so I can get away from it in the other direction. Or I could just throw this chaff grenade and temporarily disable it along with the other tech in the area. This move does come at a cost though by jamming your radar along with everything else. Another tool that comes in handy is Snake's cigarettes. When faced with invisible lasers, Snake can light up a cig and blow smoke in front of him to see where the lasers are. This allows the player to get past them and remain undetected. And if you really get into a pinch, there's one more option. Snake can tactically camouflage himself by adopting the surrounding characteristics of his immediate environment you can hide in a box. It's one of the most iconic and unique moments in any video game, and has become synonymous with the series itself. It's far more than just a gimmick, however. This box is a fun and effective method of avoiding the enemy and sneaking past well-guarded areas, so don't disrespect the box. It might just save your life. Hey everyone, Evan here, and I'm interrupting this video really quickly to bring you a word from our sponsor, me. Making these videos takes a ton of time and work, but I do love doing it, and a like and subscription is more than enough for me to keep doing it at least for a while. That being said, I, of course, do have a Patreon in case you want to throw me a couple of dollars to support me making these, and it also gives you access to my Discord server in case you want to come hang out and talk directly to me and the other boys in the server. On top of that, I have some really cool merch linked down below. It's just some edgy and interesting video game aesthetic artwork that you might like, along with some other original logos and artwork. Additionally, I also write a lot of original music. If you're a fan of the Doom or Doom Eternal soundtracks, you'll probably like what I've been putting together. You can find some of that music here on the channel, and you can find the rest of it on my Spotify, which I have linked to in my Linktree. You can find the link to that in the description below. Lastly, I've been writing and working with an illustrator on an original run of graphic comic book material. We're still working on page-by-page basis, but we're hoping to have the first issue finalized and out by the beginning of 2024. But you can keep up with each of the pages as we finish them and release them. We're hoping to do 1 or 2 per month. You can find those on my website. The link to that is also going to be in my Linktree. It's called Charnel House, the 13th Blade. It's gonna get pretty graphic and violent, so just be aware of that before you start reading. That's all from me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this retrospective. Metal Gear Solid is known as a stealth franchise, and it is for the most part, but if you remember, it was conceived as an action game, and so to really honor its roots, it must do both. Kojima was finally able to fully realize the action-packed experience he'd envisioned for the franchise all those years ago this time around, because on top of sneaking around and invading enemies, Snake is packing a whole arsenal of weapons. As mentioned earlier, you've got the SOCOM pistol, but you also get a FAMAS full-auto gas-powered rifle, fragmentation grenades, a missile launcher, and a PSG-1 sniper rifle, among other things. So when stealth fails and you get spotted, you have a last resort in the form of a hail of bullets.
I'm telling you, shoot!
And trust me, there's going to be many times where you're caught and this is your only option to survive. And sometimes you're not even going to have that because you're going to run out of ammo. And when you need to make a quick getaway, CQC becomes the absolute last line of defense. Because Snake is a trained Special Forces operative, of course he's prepared for hand-to-hand combat. Snake can judo throw his enemies down to daze them or just bash out a quick combo to fracture a rib or two. Either way, your assailant is hitting the ground hard. I'd like to remind those watching that this game was released in 1998 and there was just no other video game on the market that even got close to what this was offering. Now, if you've ever played a Metal Gear Solid game, then the chances are you're familiar with the different phases of combat, which you'll see in the top right corner. When the player is hidden, he has access to his radar where he can make informed decisions while progressing forward through the levels. If he's spotted, however, the radar becomes disabled and replaced with an alert warning, letting the player know that the soldiers in his area now know where he is and that reinforcements are incoming to engage. From there, the player must make a decision on if he should stand and fight or run and hide, which, while I know sounds bad to say like that, it is often a better option not only for your survival, but also for your resources. After your enemies lose track of your position, you enter into an evasion status where you have a few seconds to stay hidden before they abandon the search and return to their original positions. All of this action culminates into an experience that feels tense and alive. It creates a dynamic foundation for the team to offer up various cool set pieces, most of which involve Snake tackling a larger-than-life opponent and an exciting boss battle. Who here likes Dark Souls? Because although I haven't really played too many of the Souls-like games, I am familiar enough with the concept to know that a fundamental part of their design is based around moving from boss battle to boss battle. See, the average game has a few boss battles and act more as special events. In Metal Gear Solid, boss battles are the main event, and the sequence in between those boss battles act more as short breaks, because you'll be bouncing between boss battle to boss battle in this game. The core gameplay loop pretty much treats boss battles like primary combat arenas, and the stealth sections where you fight regular guards are more like exploration sections with obstacles to let the player breathe in between those boss battles. So let's break them down, one by one. Up first...
Special Operations Foxhound.
Revolver Ocelot. The first boss of the game and one of the most important characters of the entire franchise, equal even to Solid Snake himself, and arguably even more important. This first boss battle is burned into my memory from childhood more than any of the others, if only because I played it the most amount of times. The conflict is simple. ArmsTech President Kenneth Baker is strung up to a post with multiple wires tying him to the poles surrounding him. Those same wires are also tied to a friendly stack of C4 that will game end you, Ocelot, and Baker if you touch them. You need to save Baker. It's one of your primary objectives coming into Shadow Moses, and Ocelot is standing between you and your mission. A duel commences.
Draw!
The player has to dodge Ocelot's shots and wait for him to reload, which takes him a surprisingly short amount of time given that he's using a cult single-action army, which has 6 shots and he is reloading individually. This battle is a little bit harder than you would think, given having to listen to find out where he's hiding and that he can ricochet bullets off of the wall to hit you if you're behind cover, so aggression is the modus operandi of defeating Ocelot. Chase him down, empty your mags, and stay moving. Standing still will get you killed. Once you finish him off, however, a cutscene triggers and a mysterious cybernetic ninja cuts the duel short. He cuts the duel short. Cuts it short. This cyborg ninja slices Ocelot's hand off of his body, before then freeing Baker and initiating active camouflage. This is the point in the game where most people were so caught off guard and intrigued that they couldn't help but get invested. Who was that ninja? Why was he dressed like a cyborg? Well, we have to keep making our way through Shadow Moses to figure that out, which leads us to an outside area in between buildings and right into the arms of our next boss battle.
Territory. Snakes don't belong in Alaska. I will not let you pass.
Remember that tank I mentioned earlier? Well, it turns out that they have 2 of those, and you have to fight this one. Inside that tank is our next boss, Vulcan Raven, a giant Alaskan native guy who looks like he claims lifetime natty and attributes his physique to his shaman lifestyle tenets. If it's pronounced shaman, then tell Campbell that, not me.
Vulcan Raven, giant and shaman.
This battle is a little different from the last one. You'll need to navigate this snowy area which is littered with landmines, a task which you'll probably find impossible if you didn't explore the first building long enough to find the thermal goggles. Utilizing said thermal vision, however, we're able to make our way past these mines with relative ease. If you try to run straight towards Raven, then the tank will blow Snake straight back to the NES. So the only way to make your way to the tank is to go prone and crawl through the snow underneath the terrain while avoiding his tank shells. Which, actually, he tells you this in the cutscene before.
That's right, you belong on the ground. You should crawl on the ground like the snake you are.
If you're not paying attention, this will just sound like taunting, but no, it's Kojima literally telling the player how to defeat the boss. Speaking of which, the game does that almost every single time, but I'll cover that later. After crawling your way to the tank, it becomes a matter of picking up some frag grenades and lobbing them at the top of the tank until you kill the guys manning the guns. Then you just run around in circles and do this until the boss is out of health, and you'll win the battle. It's honestly one of the easier battles, but it's kind of unique, I guess. It stands out in a cool way. Right after beating the tank, however, Raven appears out of it and starts talking to the leader of this operation, and it's revealed they actually wanted you to win that battle. They're letting you pass on purpose, taking it easy on you to see how far you get. Ominous. And sort of a cool explanation for how Snake is able to take down a tank on his own, you know? We then enter Building 2, where our weapons are disabled because if we fire off a stray shot, it might ignite the nuclear warheads. Seriously, the attention to detail in this game is unmatched by any other game from that time period. Sneaking our way through the nuclear warhead warehouse, trying not to get caught or fire off many shots, we eventually make our way to the elevator, and then we head down, do some things, and...
Looks like they were cut by some type of blade.
It's a ghost.
This scene freaked me out as a kid. Hey look, it's that ninja! Gray Fox bringing in one of my favorite boss battles, if only because of the concept. You can't use any firearm against him, he's too fast. The only way to handle this is for Snake to remember the basics of CQC. It's the basis of all combat. Once you get it figured out, this boss isn't... Once you get this boss figured out, it's really not that hard. Standard boss battle fare, figure out his movement patterns and react accordingly. The first little phase isn't too bad, he bounces around and takes swipes at you, but you just gotta stay moving to avoid his hits. When you see an opening, hit him with a 1-2-3 combo. After a while, he'll head into the second phase of hiding in corners via his active stealth camouflage and just wait to ambush you. You can run around and try to scope him out, risking getting clipped, or you can just throw a chaff grenade and listen to him scream. This deactivates his stealth camouflage and makes it easy to go in for another combo. The final phase is him getting mad and just slowly walking towards you before winding back a punch and launching it. Easy to dodge and easier to counter. And that's it. Gray Fox is... Okay, so when you get him to this point, he starts using the Force Scream ability from KOTOR 2 and spontaneously exploding in electricity, which damages you. So you gotta finish him off at this point and finally wrap up this boss battle with Gray Fox. It's still one of my favorite boss battles, all things considered, but it did catch me off guard a few times. The concept of fist fighting a cyborg ninja in a hidden lab located off the Bering Sea shoreline somewhere in Alaska is not an experience I can even get close to replicating in concept anywhere else. It's literally just this, even to this day.
It's like one of my Japanese animes.
Thanks, Otacon. Now, if you're not familiar with Metal Gear Solid, you might be wondering how we went from infiltrating an old nuclear warhead disposal facility turned into the aforementioned insane scenario. Weren't we here to stop terrorists from threatening the world with nuclear war? No worries, things are about to fly way more off the rails and get far more insane.
What happened to the music?
Here we are. The most notorious, infamous, and widely discussed boss battle from Metal Gear Solid, and arguably the whole franchise. Where do I even start with this? This whole battle had my childhood self perplexed and utterly mind blown. You actually cannot beat Psycho Mantis without adjusting your physical console mid-fight. He is impossible. Why? Well, because he's psychic, he possesses the ability to read your controller inputs and react accordingly to dodge your attacks. And I'm speaking in-game here, see for yourself. The actual fight is impossible to win in-game, so what you eventually have to do after being told is swap your controller from port 1 to port 2, which removes his ability to read your inputs so you can put him down like the sick dog that he is. The battle itself isn't actually that hard, honestly. Drop on the floor, dodge moving objects, get up, shoot mantis, rinse, repeat. The most memorable thing about it is the immense shattering of that fourth wall. Kojima does not care about the fourth wall. This actually happens in-game, by the way. It's not an editing trick on my part. This screen going to black with the green Hideo text is part of the Psycho Mantis boss battle. Anyway, we kill Psycho Mantis, listen to him cry, and it's emotional or something. We walk outside, finally able to catch our breath, and we move past some wolves who get along way better with Meryl than Snake, apparently. Also, I'm going to play this unedited, so just enjoy this. I know Kojima did this on purpose.
This place is mine. I'll take point again. Stay back, okay?
But the radar isn't working. And since we can't use the mine detector either...
Leave it to me. So, what do you think? Pretty good, huh?
How did you know where the mines were?
It sounds weird, but when Mantis dove into my mind, I was able to see where the mines were placed. Are you impressed?
Well, a little bit.
Only a little?
Here, we're introduced to our next boss battle, the only boss in the whole game who's described as beautiful despite looking like a polygonal nightmare in the game itself. Although we're introduced to our first sniper battle, we can't take her on right now. In fact, we have to backtrack all the way back to the first area in order to get our hands on a PSG-1 sniper rifle. I hope you're okay with a little bit of backtracking because this game is going to lean on it pretty hard. Just like I mentioned before with the Raven fight, the game literally tells you all of this. With the Mantis fight, we're told how to beat him too. It's not relevant to anything, and I don't have a point about it. It's just interesting that the player is told exactly how to beat pretty much every boss up front via dialogue. Is it good game design, or is it bad? I don't know. I guess it depends on the player. Some people love this, some people hate it. But I do like how sometimes the game is vague with it, like the Raven fight, and then sometimes it's not, like the Mantis fight. Anyway, now we get to run all the way back past all of the wolves, through the Psycho Mantis room, take the elevator, run through the Warhead storage room, across the snowfield, avoid the mines, get back to the first elevator, take it down to this room, go sneak into one of these other rooms so that we can get a sniper rifle that allows us to go toe-to-toe with one of the deadliest snipers in the world. So what now? You guessed it. We run all the way back to where Meryl's body was, but now she's not there. That doesn't mean Wolf has given up though, she is still up there, with the smell of blood hunting her prey. And by hunting, I mean running left and right while trying to shoot at you before you shoot at her. Speaking of, trying to actually land a shot on her is like playing a drunk simulator. The crosshair literally will not hold still, it sways everywhere. The only reason it does this is to justify this specific mechanic that Kojima wanted to introduce of taking diazepam to calm your heart rate and hold the crosshair still long enough to pinpoint her a few times. After you take those sweet, sweet drugs, you're able to hit her pretty easily as she runs back and forth on this ledge. I don't think there was really anything like this in a video game back then though, so I guess it's pretty cool. All in all, it's a fairly easy boss fight, but you aren't able to actually kill her here. In fact, you get snuck up on and captured. So much for being a stealth operative, Snake. Now we get to what is probably the hardest boss fight that you will have in the game. You. Or rather, your own dexterity and stamina. And even then, technically it's really just the second phase of the Ocelot battle. See, you fight almost every boss in this game 2 times, in one form or another. This is sort of the second time you fight Ocelot, but it's not really a fight, it's a torture sequence. And I say it's a boss battle against yourself because you have to outlast Ocelot's torture in order to save Meryl. And this is what it all hinges on. The game has 2 endings, and they're nearly identical except for one thing. Either Meryl survives to the end cutscene, or she doesn't and you leave with Otacon instead. It doesn't really affect the game in any way other than changing some of the dialogue in the later half of the game to reflect your failure here and replacing Meryl with Otacon in the end. But saving Meryl is the canon ending, so obviously that's the one I had to get. You can hit the select button to submit to the torture, but that causes Meryl to die. If you die, you have to revert all the way back to your last save, which, if you're smart, is right after you beat Wolf for the first time. If you push through it though, well, in my case, I had to do it a second time, but then you are able to escape your imprisonment. There's 4 ways to escape. You can wait for this guard to get diarrhea and hide under the bed. He won't be able to see you and he'll run in to find you. You can squirt this ketchup under you to make it look like you're bleeding out and he'll come check on you to see if you're dead. You can call Otacon and he'll sneak in and unlock the door, and if you don't think to do any of those things, Gray Fox will come to your rescue eventually. After escaping, you get this just torturously long stairwell that you have to climb up, and you are being chased by guards the entire time. I tried so many different ways to kill them all before I realized the best way is to just spam stun grenades until I make it to the top. In fact, most people actually consider this sequence a boss battle in and of itself. When we finally get to the top of the tower, we get to see what is honestly probably one of the coolest scenes in the game for me. Although it's really short, I remember having my mind blown by this sequence as a kid. In Die Hard-like fashion, we have to throw a rope and jump off the top of this tower as a Hind D fires bullets at us and things are just exploding everywhere. Then, we get to play the scene as we rappel down the side of the tower ourselves, trying to avoid being shot or hit by the steam from the pipes that are bursting. Eventually, we get to the bottom, and a group of soldiers are waiting for us. The only way to take them out is to grab our PSG-1 sniper rifle and hit them from a distance. Then we get to the other side of the bridge, and of course, the elevator back down is out. Our pal Otacon does show back up, however, and says he might be able to fix it. In the meantime, Snake knows he'll have to do something about that chopper. So we head up to the top of this tower, and now we're in, Stinger missile launcher in hand, and begin our next boss battle. The first encounter with Liquid Snake and a Hind D. Utilizing the Stinger missile launcher, we're able to fire off some rounds in between the Hind D's assaults on the rooftop. I love this part. It really seems like something you'd see in an action movie, which is totally on brand for Kojima. Let's hope we see some more stuff like this in Death Stranding too. The battle itself is honestly pretty straightforward. You take cover, wait for an opening, fire off a missile, and repeat until the Hind D goes down. We're roughly halfway through the game at this point, and with several more boss battles to go, so in order to catch us off guard, we're attacked in an elevator by multiple soldiers in stealth camouflage, as if to remind the player that the game still has a few tricks up its sleeve. I know it's not really a boss battle, but this seemed like the best time to mention it, especially since it's pretty much the only notable fight between the Hind D and then the next boss, which, by the way, is not a new boss, but rather the second round of a boss that we fought earlier. That's right, Sniper Battle Round 2, and the Canine Queen is back. This battle is a little bit more complicated than the first one, though. First off, it's frustrating right at first because it seems like there's nowhere to go where you weren't getting shot by her. After trying a few different ways, though, you should be able to find the spot to stay over here on the far right side of the map. She'll still be able to hit you once or twice at first, but if you're fast and you've been stingy with your diazepam up to this point, then this battle will be pretty easy once you get off your first shot. It's just tracking her and killing her from there. She just kind of runs between 3 to 4 trees in order to take cover, and then wait to post up and take her shot. The battle was pretty easy after this point, so we were able to game end her and hear Otacon cry about a woman who helped kill his coworkers in a Stockholm Syndrome-like frenzy.
You said that love could bloom on the battlefield.
Anyways, there's work to be done. We're just about to the end of the line now, and there's 4 more notable boss battles left to go. The next of which is some unfinished business with a certain shaman.
This is the end of the road for you. Right, my friends? listen, they agree. Ravens aren't scavengers like most people think. They're simply returning to the natural world, that which is no longer needed. Sometimes they even attack wounded foxes.
Kojima clearly had a blast with this character's speech patterns and dialect. I actually can't believe of all the characters we see reappear in the series, we never see Raven again. No, the Sons of Liberty cameo doesn't count. Raven is big, bad, mad, and carrying a minigun, which he will use to try and shred the skin from your bone like a hailstorm peels paint from a 13-year-old sedan. Fortunately, this boss battle is way easier than you would think, given the opponent I just finished describing. In my case, I just posted up, fired off some remote-controlled missiles, and then dropped a few C4 charges and waited for him to run over them. I think there's a few different ways to tackle this boss battle, but I chose to play it safe and just knock him out of commission.
You are a snake which was not created by nature. You and the boss. You are from another world. A world that I do not wish to know. Go and do battle with him. I will be watching from above.
And with that, the Foxhound party has pretty much been dismantled from the inside out. Decoy Octopus is dead. Oh, yeah, I forgot. He was the DARPA chief. So, Ocelot's been handled.
My hand!
Psycho Mantis is dead on the carpet. Sniper Wolf is dead on the snow. There's only one member of Foxhound left. Our twin Snake, Liquid. But for now, Snake has to refocus and remember the mission priority. Metal Gear has to be disarmed. And after a painful amount of backtracking to reshape our PAL key, Snake manages to disable Metal Gear's nuclear capabilities. Only he's been had. It was all a trick to make Snake unknowingly arm Metal Gear's nuclear capabilities, because they never had access to begin with, they being the Sons of Big Boss. I just wanted to touch on that a little bit so I could give some context to what's coming next. That's right. You know what time it is. The titular boss itself, the bipedal nuclear-capable mecha tank, Metal Gear. This is it. Since we've arrived on Shadow Moses Island, this has been our objective, our prerogative. Stop Metal Gear. Well, for a PS1 game, it certainly delivers. Look at the scale of this. All we need is for it to be called Metal Gear the Bipedal Nuclear Terror or something, and it'd look like a From Software game. Not exactly, though, because the game does tell you what you need to do right off the bat, but doing so is still somewhat of a challenge. I died more than a few times trying to put this thing down. And how do we do that? Well, just like I mentioned before about the other bosses, the game straight up tells you. Snake can call Otacon and he'll reveal exactly how to destroy the bipedal tank. A slew of well-placed Stinger rockets to the radar dish knocks out his ability to find us, which is harder than you think. You've got to move fast and hit him hard to knock out that radar dish. And it doesn't even end there. When it looks like Metal Gear is about to crush you though, Gray Fox swoops in to knock the thing out of commission, but only briefly, or at the least distract it. Unfortunately, it makes you sit through this part every single time you die. Snake refusing to pull the trigger because he refuses to kill Gray Fox, who ends up dying anyway. But whatever. This initiates the second phase of the Metal Gear fight, which is really hard unless you know what you're doing, which thankfully I did. After looking it up on YouTube because I got so frustrated with it. Essentially, you just stand underneath it until Liquid loses sight of you. Since he doesn't have access to his radar dish anymore, he has to do it by visual eyesight. And then once he can't see you, by hiding under it, you shoot him with a rocket. And after that, the technological terror is destroyed, but Snake gets knocked out in the process, which brings us directly to our next boss fight.
Are you familiar with Big Chungus? Big Chungus? Yes, Big Chungus, the world-renowned meme of an oversized cartoon rabbit. What does some dumb joke have to do with your plan? Everything, Snake. This isn't about jokes. This is about legacy. Do you even know who Big Chungus is? He's just some cartoon rabbit. Not just some rabbit. The most famous rabbit in cinematic history. The one and only Bugs Bunny.
Liquid Snake himself. This boss battle is my favorite, and also the one that took me the most tries. Liquid Snake is less tired, healthier, and angrier than you, which means one of his hits feels like 10 of yours. And I mean that. Look, it takes forever to whittle him down, but he can game end you almost instantly. I take a lot from this fight though. The way it's set up feels challenging, but it's never super frustrating. When you slip and fall, the game doesn't just end, it has Snake catch himself and pull himself back up. And Liquid can even slip and fall sometimes too. The intensity of this moment is real though. It's like I can feel how hot it is on top of that destroyed Metal Gear. The two estranged brothers fighting to the death, one to save the world, the other to save his family. I can't even fault Liquid. He was, after all, raised to believe he has inferior genes to Snake. But I'll get into that later. After you finally finish Liquid off, Snake is able to best his own brother and throw him off the top of the Metal Gear, where he then takes Meryl down to safety. This is it. We're home free. Except there's still a nuke being prepared to destroy what's left of Shadow Moses Island. And not just to stop Metal Gear, it's to cover the government's own failure. Just like in real life. One last burst to freedom. Snake and Meryl make their way out of the hangar to a garage area and commandeer a jeep. The Genome soldiers aren't done though. They still have their orders, and as you're trying to escape from this bunker, you, literally as the player, this isn't a cutscene, have to gun down dozens more Genome soldiers on the way through these tunnels. You might think this is the end, but...
Not yet, Snake! It's not over yet! Liquid!
Liquid Phase 2, the final part of the last boss battle. Liquid is the son of Big Boss after all. It would never be as easy as just throwing him off a cliff. Like father, like son. I know he has a health bar here, but this part is really as easy as just keeping a steady stream of bullets hitting him until it chips away at his health bar. It's not meant to be a boss battle so much as it is like a last exciting sequence before the credits roll. And indeed, there he goes. That's the last interactive part of the game too. Although Liquid doesn't die from that, it's the Fox die that gets him in the following cutscene. But still, that's a good number of boss battles all in a single PS1 game, and most of them are all unique and creative. Can you see how this game would have felt revolutionary back in 1998? With how polished and finished this game felt on release, it even feels revolutionary now compared to modern standards of these AAA releases. If it had the graphical fidelity of a modern game, this thing would beat out pretty much anything that has come out in the last 10 years. Out of all of these battles, my favorite boss to this day remains that encounter with Liquid Snake atop the remains of the destroyed Metal Gear Rex. There's something very impactful and intense about that sequence, and I've never forgotten it.
You're out of time!
So throughout all this footage, you've probably seen a lot of very samey looking environments. And you might be thinking that it must get stale running through gray corridors with the occasional snow section. Well, not really. And that's because the level design is just that good. Each room is memorable, and it makes sense in its placement. It's basically common knowledge among the Metal Gear fan base at this point, but the reason each level feels so handcrafted is because it literally is. As in, Kojima actually built each room out of Legos to ensure that it made sense and that he and his team could visualize each room physically before beginning to create it and render it out digitally. This has resulted in a series of levels that flow incredibly well together and end up being so memorable, and not just because you backtrack enough to have it memorized. Even this first room, the cargo dock, is set up in such a way where a novice newbie can quickly piece together what he's supposed to do. A pipe in the way to encourage him to crawl under right off the bat, leading him into a big square room with some boxes stacked up in order. This creates a sense that you can move from space to space without being seen if you are careful. The next area is the same, which I covered earlier. The heliport brings in the Hind D introduction, shows the player surveillance cameras, etc. This leads into the tank hangar, which is a large open area with a big tank sitting there, obviously. This building also features 4 floors total, if you count the catwalk up there. Taking the elevator down, we arrive at the basement level 1, the holding cells. This is the area where you're introduced to the DARPA chief, who we later learn is Decoy Octopus, and Meryl, our leading lady. Also Johnny, but that's for another video. I really like how the cells here are positioned in such a way to allow this little battle sequence where you kill a bunch of guards with Meryl. It's one of the most memorable sequences in the early game. The torture device where you have to spam the X button is also located on this floor in this very building over here in this room. But that's not accessible until later in the game after you've been captured. Going down to basement level 2, we have the armory area. Here we're introduced to traps, none of which killed me because you'd have to really try to die from one of these, but I do remember one killing me as a kid though because my brain was not fully developed. You're going to come back here over and over throughout the game, but for now we can only access a couple of doors to equip us to blow through one of the walls and fight Ocelot, which that boss battle is one of the most notable things about this section. I mean, come on, it's iconic. That's all of the areas in Building 1. Which is when we head out into the canyon area and do the first fight with Raven, where he tries to kill you with a tank and then proceeds to pretend that he wasn't trying to kill you with the tank. They also litter this area with mines, so be on the lookout for that. You'll get warned by Deep Throat anyway. And now we're in Building 2, the nuclear warhead storage building. The first room has some crates and cool things to find. Also 2 floors, a ground floor and a second floor via catwalks that we actually have to use to access the elevator. Said elevator gives us access to 2 different basements. Basement level 1 is where we find a number of items including the Nikita missile launcher, a cardboard box, and various other needed items. This floor is also where the commander's room is located, and of course that's where the iconic Psycho Mantis boss battle takes place. Under that, we will arrive at basement level 2, where all of the hallways have been filled with poison gas. This is where you have to use the Nikita remote-controlled missile launcher to destroy the power box and access Emmerich's lab area. But you can also obtain a gas mask and explore this area a little bit better if you look for it. Through the hall, we find the entrance to Emmerich's lab. This is where we fought Gray Fox. I actually love how this area feels more well-lit and less dirty and dingy than the rest of the levels in the game. After that boss fight, it's right back upstairs to basement level 1 and into the commander's room where we fight Psycho Mantis. And then from there we go in and we access the cave area. This is a smaller, shorter area than some of the others. It's just a direct path straight through. It takes a little crawling and a lot of killing and avoiding wolves. At first I really didn't want to kill them, but they drew first blood. And now we're on to the underground passage. It's pretty simple, it's just a long hall outdoors in a cave area. You fight Sniper Wolf here for the first time and then get captured and have to come all the way back. Eventually, whenever you finish backtracking back to this area, it leads you into Communications Tower A. This one feels way bigger than it actually is, and that's because it's like 2 hallways and then an absurdly tall stairway scene, where the soldiers are chasing you up the whole way only to then descend back down and move to Communications Tower B, where you go up and then down some stairs and then to the other roof and fight the Hind D, then go back down into the final outdoor area. There's so much climbing up and down and hallways, you get the idea. The final outdoor area is small, but it's really cool to kind of utilize the snowy hills during the sniper battle. You kind of got the feel for this in your first Vulcan Raven fight. When the tank is on the other end of the canyon and it's firing off shots at you, you have to utilize the snowy, like hilly terrain to avoid getting shot. Well, it's pretty much the same thing with this secondary sniper battle. You have to kind of utilize the cover of the snowy hills and avoid Sniper Wolf getting a shot off at you so you can get a shot off at her first. Here's a fun fact, and this is the best time I can think of to address it. If you get into the back of any of these 3 trucks and equip one of the 3 cardboard boxes, A, B, or C, and wait, it'll fast travel you to one of the other areas with that truck. Box A takes you all the way back to the heliport. Box B takes you to the nuclear warhead storage room, ground level, and Box C just brings you right back here, the final outdoor level. I've been praising the level design of this game, and I do love it, but I kinda hate how much you have to backtrack through the third and final building, the maintenance building. The first area of Building 3 is the furnace area, which is probably the only area in the game that isn't shaded in a bluish gray hue. So it's a nice way to bring in the second disc, and it feels fresh. After making your way through this area, we take an elevator down to another area that is specifically designed for us to take another identical elevator down into the warehouse area, which ends up feeling very reminiscent of the cargo dock. This is also where you have the second Vulcan Raven fight. It's very cold looking, icy. I really like this level. It's very interesting. It's the only level that's kind of like underground ice bunker feeling. Anyways, from there, it's just the underground base where this catwalk above a bottomless pit has all of the cameras. Like, I mean, I guess part of this game's charm is that it doesn't take itself too seriously, but what is this? Why so many? Anyway, all that's left after this is the room with Metal Gear Rex inside, and the final garage where you end up stealing the Jeep. It might not seem like a lot, but the backtracking. You have to go from the back of this area to the middle of it, to the back again, then all the way back to the front of it, and then all the way back again, not even to get an item. It's just to sit in the cold until the key also gets cold, then back into the furnace area to sit until the key gets hot, and then you have to make it to the control pad before it cools down or heats up. Anyways, that's all the levels in the game. I think it's some of the best level design you can find in a PlayStation 1 title, and not just from a gameplay perspective, which that does flow super well, but also just the fact that everything makes sense where it's placed and how it's laid out. The real genius, though, behind the 3-building design structure is how Kojima literally mimics the 3-act structure of a story with the game's level design itself. Technically, there's 4 buildings if you count the communications tower, but that part of the game is more of a set piece than anything else. Your first pass through Building 1 and Building 2 is what makes up the first act of the game. Break in Building 1 where DARPA Chief dies. We introduce Meryl, talk to her, fight Ocelot, introduce Gray Fox. Baker dies, go outside, introduce Vulcan Raven. Defeat him the first time, move to Building 2, we fight Gray Fox, introduce Otacon. Have a moment of romance with Meryl, fight Psycho Mantis. And then we walk outside of Building 2, and I can kind of feel Act 2 begin. Act 1 was very plot and character heavy. It showed us our players, set the stakes, and laid out the plot. Act 2 steps off the plot for a while and gets heavy on set pieces and action. The second act starts, in my opinion, when you walk into the caves with the wolves. A solemn start to breathe. Meryl is good with them, it's cute. Then she's shot by Sniper Wolf. We have to backtrack to Building 1 to get a PSG-1 sniper rifle, come back, fight and defeat Sniper Wolf. Then we get captured and tortured, escape our prison cell, make our way back through Buildings 1 and 2 again, enter the communications tower, fight off what feels like an army of soldiers as we climb these stairs, rappel off a building, kill more soldiers, ascend more stairs, fight a whole helicopter, get ambushed by stealth camouflage soldiers in an elevator, then finally kill Sniper Wolf in a dark snow battle. That feels like a second act to me if I've ever seen one. Act 3 starts, fittingly, when we enter Building 3. It opens into a furnace level. It's red, it's hot, it feels like the beginning of the end. It's past here, the hottest area of the game, where we descend down into an icy storage room that is also the coldest area of the game. And then that's where we finally kill Vulcan Raven, who was introduced all the way back in Act 1. And then we fight Metal Gear Rex, and then Liquid, and get to watch Snake and Meryl quite literally ride off into the sunrise. The levels and the very map itself are designed to accommodate the narrative's 3-act structure, and I cannot overstate how well it works. We're going to get analytical and make this sort of a speed round because I want to touch on every weapon and item that you'll use or pick up in the game. So I'll be pretty quick and brief on some of these, but no stone unturned here. We're doing an exhaustive retrospective. First up is the weapons. SOCOM Special Operations Command Pistol, your primary handgun and my personal go-to weapon throughout the game. There's an abundance of ammo for it, not to mention a built-in laser sight and a suppressor attachment as well. The aiming on this was far more consistent than the FAMAS was, so it was hard for me not to just go back to it constantly. Speaking of the FAMAS, you'll find that in the game as well. Described in-game as a bullpup-style assault rifle, there's plenty of ammo for it throughout the game. However, I found its snap-to aiming to be unreliable and inconsistent, so I didn't end up using it all that much unless I was trying to conserve my handgun ammo. The PSG-1 sniper rifle is literally necessary. You can't take on Wolf without it, and it's hidden on the second floor basement in Building 1. Trying to use it without diazepam is crazy though, but I do think the weapon is a great addition to the game. Of course, how are you supposed to fight boss battles without a traditional rocket launcher? Well, the Stinger comes in to fill that role. It has a motion tracker lock-on mechanism, which is helpful in preserving ammunition during battle, and is predominantly going to be used against the Hind E and Metal Gear Rex boss fight. You can technically use it just about anywhere though. Then we've got some fragmentation grenades, which are not only cool, but a complete necessity for completing the first Raven fight in the tank. However, I didn't really ever use them after that point in the game. Now, you heard me talk about this one earlier in the video, the Nikita remote-controlled missile launcher. It is required to bypass the gas-filled section in Building 2 so that you can access Hal's lab. But I also used it once or twice more later in the game, including during the second fight with Vulcan Raven. I don't think you need to use it there though, I just chose to. The detail of Metal Gear Solid is really shown in these because Kojima's team went as far as to give each missile its own fuel gauge so that you can monitor and strategically utilize the missiles appropriately, which I didn't even know until I had already beaten the game, but it's such a neat addition. Claymore mines are something you'll find scattered across your trek through Shadow Moses Island, most of the time when they explode and knock your health down, almost killing you. But they can also be used to lay traps for enemy soldiers. I didn't really ever use these, but I can see how other players might want to utilize them in their own playthroughs. Also, pro tip, if you crawl up to them, Snake will automatically disarm them and put them in your inventory. Another pretty cool little detail. Next up is our handy C4 explosives. I remember this game is what introduced me to the very concept of what C4 even is, and it's absolutely mandatory in the game, as you'll need it to blow through certain walls in order to progress through the game. Like the Claymores, it can also be used to lay traps for enemies, and I also made use of it during my second fight with Raven. Stun grenades, I mean they're just your standard flashbang. There is one part where you're running up an obnoxiously tall flight of stairs and being chased and shot at by soldiers both behind and in front of you, and I could not have gotten past this section without stun grenades. They can be useful to pull you out of a bind or get the jump on a guard. Chaff grenades will actually be one of the most important and utilized pieces of equipment in the game. They act as EMP grenades, zapping any technology nearby, including your own radar. They do wear off fast though, so be ready and aware of their functionality. Also take care of how many you use and where, because you will really need them as the game progresses. Earlier in the video, I'm sure you heard me bring up diazepam. So if you were paying attention, you're already familiar with its usage. A tranquilizer, or rather a nerve suppressant used to stabilize breathing when zoomed into the scope of a sniper rifle. That's pretty much its only usage, but you'll want to have some of these on hand when you go toe-to-toe with Wolf. The mine detector does exactly what you think it does. Mines show up on your radar, helping you dodge past them and avoid being dismembered. And now what would our boy Solid Snake be without his iconic cigarettes? In Metal Gear Solid, however, these aren't just a design choice. They serve a purpose and can help you out in a pinch. There are a handful of rooms littered around the buildings of Shadow Moses Island equipped with infrared lasers invisible to the naked eye. Now, if you stumbled upon some thermal goggles while exploring, then you're set. You can see exactly where those invisible lasers are. But what if you didn't? Well, then Snake can light up a cig and blow the cigarette smoke out to show him where the lasers are located, and then sneak past them with ease. As far as I'm concerned, this is the canon and only in-character way to handle this. And now, you knew this was coming. There's dozens of little quirky, iconic symbols and phrases associated with the Metal Gear Solid series, but this one might just be the most notorious of all. The cardboard box. As mentioned earlier in this video, the box has multiple uses, from hiding from pursuers to pretending to be cargo requiring transfer to another location. The very idea of hiding inside of a cardboard box has become seemingly synonymous with the Metal Gear franchise and spawned countless in-jokes, references, and parodies throughout the years. It's just not a Metal Gear Solid game if you're not hiding in a cardboard box at some point. Night vision goggles, which you'll probably never use and could easily beat the entire game without ever equipping. I like that there's so much equipment to choose from here, but I really feel like there should have been a section that required these. I think they were only added because in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake they were also featured, and this was technically the third Metal Gear game, so maybe they just put them in as an homage, but you don't ever actually even need them in the game, so a section that kind of required them to justify them being an item would have been nice. Then we have the thermal goggles, which I brought up when discussing the practical use of cigarettes in-game, and they are much more useful than their night vision counterparts. You can use them to see infrared and visible lasers, hidden mines and claymores, among other heat signatures, and when backtracking through dangerous areas, these can prove to be a pretty big stress relief. As for the gas mask, it's exactly what it sounds like. You can enter gas-filled areas and survive, which can actually save you later in the game during a final area. Then you also have the magnifying scope, which I used precisely once, but can be cool to hone in on little details. I'm glad it's here, if only for more in-depth RP-style playthroughs. Ketchup. You can use it to play dead, or Snake can eat it. That's it. Cold medicine. In Metal Gear Solid, Snake can actually catch a cold. So when this happens, you can use it to cure that cold. Otherwise, he might sneeze and alert a guard. Yes, this is actually in the game. I just didn't get footage of it happening, but you can easily look it up on YouTube. If you stand in the cold too long, or stand in the water too long, Snake will catch a cold. Rope. You use it to rappel down the building in the second act of the game. Body armor, which you get in the third act of the game. Obviously, it reduces damage taken from bullets and explosions and whatnot. I pretty much kept it equipped most of the time after I had it available to me. Rations act as your health kits. You eat them to restore your life bar, and for some reason, Kojima's team and their obsessive attention to detail made them to where they'll freeze if you're in the cold for too long, and so you'll have to warm them before you can restore your health. Be careful how much time you spend outside in the cold. The optical disc is a plot item with no actual use in-game. The security card is what allows you to access higher and higher security doors as you upgrade its rating, starting at 1 and going all the way to 7. 10 if you use cheats. And that's all of the weapons and equipment that you'll get on a standard comprehensive playthrough. But there's 3 more items that you can acquire after beating the game in a certain way. If you're able to beat the game canonically and save Meryl, you will unlock a bandana that gives you unlimited ammo on subsequent playthroughs. If you submit to the torture and don't save Meryl, you'll unlock a stealth camouflage item that is arguably way more useful than the bandana. But it makes sense that you would get this with Otacon's ending, since he used the stealth camouflage for the entire game. And lastly, if you beat it twice and get both endings, you'll unlock the tuxedo, which gives you the effect of looking debonair. Cheers, Mr. Snake. What makes a good story? What does it take to breathe life into a narrative in such a way that it would be considered objectively good? Well, that's totally subjective, some might say. And in many ways, I guess that may be true, but there are instances of a story that hits all the right notes at just the right time. And in 1998, I believe Metal Gear Solid did just that. It is not the greatest story ever told or anything even remotely close. It's often campy, silly, and even more often derivative of itself. But there's other parts of it that are so genuine, so relatable, and at its best moments, even deeply philosophical. Most importantly, it was in so many ways one of a kind. As we covered earlier in the video, Metal Gear Solid was the only video game on the market with an experience like this. Its competition was saturated in amateurish writing, bad voice acting, and cringy dialogue. Now, Metal Gear Solid doesn't have the best dialogue I've ever heard either, but it's leagues above what video games were offering at the time in terms of quality. Now, I'm about to dig into the plot of this game, and I cannot cover everything here. There's literally over 4 hours of just codec conversations, all filled with unique dialogue, and over half of it is completely irrelevant to the main plot. Yet there's so many side tangents and subplots referenced in this video, it would simply become longer than the game itself if I were to try to cover everything. So I want to dig into just the main themes and plot of the game. There is a lot up to interpretation within any story, so everything I say is, at best, my own interpretation, but I'll try to be as accurate to the original intention as I can in my analysis. Legacy. Across every mainline entry of the Metal Gear franchise, the story always comes back to this word, this concept, what it means to pass on what you've done. What does that mean within Metal Gear Solid? Our protagonist, Solid Snake, is the physical and psychological embodiment of legacy. Throughout the game, he's hailed as a hero for his actions in the first 2 Metal Gear games, which depicted him murdering the first decoy big boss in Outer Heaven, and then later the real big boss in Zanzibar Land. His codename Solid Snake isn't even his real name, and he's not even the only Snake, much less the original. Les Enfants Terribles, from Big Boss's name to the twin snakes. Solid and Liquid Snake, twin brothers, and 2 of 3 attempts to synthetically replicate the sheer capability of Big Boss, the man deemed by most to be the ultimate soldier. That is what Les Enfants Terribles was after all, the name of the black budget project to clone Big Boss into more soldiers. Take the achievements of a genuine natural super soldier and replicate it into something more, to pass on his legacy. As with the nature of life, entropy took effect. The genes split into dominant and recessive, one twin inheriting the recessive qualities of their father, and the other twin receiving the better qualities. The unfair life of genetic destiny, yet this legacy continues. According to Liquid Snake, Solid Snake is the twin with all of the fortune of inheriting their father's dominant genes, the replica of Big Boss, and a genuine super soldier. This isn't true though. Ocelot reveals at the end of the game after the credits that Solid Snake is the inferior twin genetically speaking. Liquid Snake was misled. He was the superior brother with the dominant genes. He died believing the lie that he was born inferior. But the truth is that he had all of the genetic advantages from the start. Snake didn't win because he had any advantages, but rather, Liquid lost due to the burden of manifesting his own inferiority. He said it so much that the truth is he believed he was destined to lose despite being the genetic superior. Solid Snake, on the other hand, despite having inferior genes, inheriting all of the recessive traits of their father, still prevails time and time again, because mentality isn't made in a tube. It's the result of a crucible. Despite taking on all of the best genetic traits of Big Boss, Liquid was not his successor. Solid Snake is the one to carry the torch of Big Boss's legacy, because that legacy of mentality is taught, it's learned, it cannot be manufactured. Well, actually, that's for another video. So what exactly is the plot of Metal Gear Solid anyway? Well, a special task force unit of unusually capable beings has usurped and taken a nuclear warhead disposal facility in Alaska hostage, and is threatening to launch a nuke if the US government doesn't meet their demands. There's no storming the place or they'll set off the nukes. Fortunately, the now famous Solid Snake lives in Alaska already, and they contact him with the situation and ask if he'd be willing to help. He agrees. A dog of war. This is what he was made for, after all. And so that is where the game begins. Sent in practically blind, Snake's job is simply to make contact with and rescue both DARPA Chief Donald Anderson and the president of military contracting company ArmsTech, Kenneth Baker. Following that, he is to investigate whether or not the Foxhound unit really can launch a nuke, and try to prevent that from happening if so. Now, if you've watched up to this point, I think you've put together a pretty good idea of how that goes, but let's run through the motions again. After arriving to the island, Snake infiltrates Building 1 and breaks into the prison cell where they're supposedly keeping Donald Anderson, the DARPA chief. As we covered earlier, however, this is not the DARPA chief. He was already dead before Snake ever even arrived. The man Snake encounters is a fraud, a member of Foxhound, codenamed Decoy Octopus. This encounter with Snake causes Octopus to suffer what appears to be a severe heart attack and die. Snake is bewildered by this, and you don't learn what happened until way later, but I'll go ahead and spoil it. Fox die. Fox die is described as a retrovirus that targets people's specific DNA and kills them by flooding into their bloodstream and causing cardiac arrest. Snake has been injected with the nanomachines that carry said retrovirus. He's a carrier, and half the people on Shadow Moses Island are the targets. This is revealed later in the game, but it wouldn't necessarily have even mattered if Snake had died, so long as Liquid got close enough to the body to examine it that he could have been infected by the Fox die virus. Not sure what their plan was for if this happened, though. Following the death of Decoy Octopus, Snake aggressively calls Colonel Roy Campbell, his handler from previous games, and his handler once again on this mission, to say that something isn't right, but Campbell then denies that there's anything he's not telling him. Following this is our introduction to the leading lady, Meryl Silverberg, who points a gun at Snake's head. They have a brief little interaction before being interrupted by various genome soldiers. Meryl takes her first kill, but only after heavy insistence from Snake. After this, she ditches Snake to go and hide elsewhere on the base. Meryl isn't just any random soldier though, she was a trainee stationed at Shadow Moses during a weapons exercise, and the niece of Colonel Roy Campbell, the same man handling your mission. He is invested in her safety, and asks Snake to watch out for her, to which Snake reluctantly agrees to try his best. Snake then moves on, sneaking through the facility until he finds the other person he was there to rescue being held hostage by Ocelot and strapped to a pole with C4. Snake of course fights Ocelot and wins due to the interference from Gray Fox, and pulls Arms Tech President Kenneth Baker down from the pole, only to then have a brief conversation with him and watch him die spontaneously after a heart attack as well. Snake isn't stupid. 2 heart attacks in a row shortly after making contact with him? There's something up, and Snake knows it, but Snake has no idea about Fox die just yet, so it just presses on and knows he's being lied to. Now that Snake knows that there's a Metal Gear on the island, his directive is to make contact with the head technician, Hal Emmerich, and find out how to stop it before it gains nuclear capability. This, of course, is where you fight Gray Fox hand to hand and then learn what you can about Metal Gear from Hal, aka Otacon. After this, the main plot sort of takes a back seat to the immediate events and obstacles between Snake and Metal Gear, i.e. fighting Psycho Mantis, fighting Sniper Wolf, surviving torture, taking out Liquid's Hind D, killing Wolf, and killing Vulcan Raven. All of this is little more than just obstacles between Snake and stopping Metal Gear, but it is all great in its characterization. The plot picks up again after we see Metal Gear Rex in its chambers. Snake has to go mold the PAL key in his inventory to the shape of 3 different keycards in order to supposedly permanently disarm Metal Gear's nuclear capability, but it was a trick. He actually activated it instead, and now Snake has to fight and destroy Metal Gear, and then we get back into the real plot with the big confrontation between him and Liquid. You might be wondering, why the hell did Liquid do all of this? Well, it's like I said before, legacy. What good is a soldier in a world without war? Even as far back as Big Boss himself, the goal was a free nation of warriors, and the right to exist and thrive on the conflict of combat. Liquid's primary demand to the Pentagon this whole time was the remains of Big Boss. The reason for this, as revealed by Liquid Snake himself, was that all of the soldiers on the island, Liquid's own men called the Genome Soldiers, were merged with partial DNA samples of Big Boss. Not to mention Liquid and Solid themselves were exact clones. He needed the DNA because all of their genes were mutating and breaking down at an accelerated rate, and they didn't have many more years to live unless they were able to synthesize a cure with Big Boss's remains. Liquid Snake had been led to believe for many years that he was an inferior brother to Solid Snake, having lived in his brother's shadow for so long. Not to mention it was clear to him as well that even their father, the man whom Solid Snake had killed, favored Solid Snake himself. Liquid was burning not only with envy, but a mixture of decades of scorn as the inferior genetic waste left over from Solid Snake's creation, and an ambitious drive to heal and preserve the Genome Soldiers, the men who he himself referred to as his genetic brothers. The irony of all of this is that despite his father wanting nothing to do with him, it was Liquid who wanted to continue an attempt to fulfill Big Boss's dream of a freelance private military mercenary nation, and ensure a world where soldiers were not only necessary, but praised and glorified for their sacrifice, as opposed to thrown away as soon as their purpose had been fulfilled. Just as Big Boss had seen happen to his own mentor, as Solid had seen happen to Big Boss, and just like what happened to Solid Snake himself. It's worth mentioning here that after the events of Zanzibar Land, where Solid Snake killed Big Boss in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, although he was initially praised as a hero, the US government retroactively found him guilty of multiple crimes to justify his arrest, despite his own actions keeping the world away from an outright nuclear war. This grander sentiment beyond Liquid's own petty personal agenda remains a strong driving force in not only his motivation, but the trend of most of the games in the franchise. So often it comes back to this, sometimes in a more serious tone, other times in a bit of a sillier direction, yet the message remains the same. Is war necessary to find and preserve strength in the world? And moreover, should we just allow suits and ties who will never see combat or hold a weapon dictate who goes to war and when? The whole point of Liquid Snake's plan, and his ex-Foxhound unit he redubbed as the Sons of Big Boss, is the perseverance not only of the legacy he hails from, but the maintaining of the men he calls brothers, and an established future for his own name and legacy. Haunted by his own perception of himself, however, or perhaps just Solid Snake's own intense capacity for combat, Liquid Snake would never live to see his dream become a reality. Legacy. That's the theme of Metal Gear Solid. That is the core, the beating heart of this game's narrative, and as such, its storyline and plot. In a time when video games were known for bad voice acting and embarrassing vocal performances, Metal Gear Solid introduced a level of quality that other games just could not match at the time. I don't want to say it's like the best voice acting in any video game ever, but I will say many from this voice cast would go on to be some of the biggest names in the industry. Let's talk about their performances and their characters at the same time. I won't be going over every single character, but I do want to cover the heavy hitters. Also, I'll just be addressing the English voice actors since that's the way I've experienced the games, but I will note that from what I can tell, the Japanese voice actors and actresses are spectacular as well. And first up is our reluctant hero, Solid Snake. Voiced by David Hayter, arguably the most recognized part of Snake is his gruff, tough-as-nails voice. David brought a real sound of tortured, weathered protagonist to the role. Now, Solid Snake's role in the game is simple: infiltrate Shadow Moses Island, save the VIP hostages, stop the nuclear threat. This is his motivation, this is what he does. Not to mention he could potentially serve time in prison should he refuse, but Snake is a dog of war. He wouldn't say no. Of course, his involvement becomes more clear later on when we discover the Secretary of Defense had planned to kill off the Foxhound unit in Shadow Moses by using the Foxdie virus and infecting Snake as a carrier. Snake was unaware of this, however. Meryl Silverberg, our leading lady and a rookie soldier stationed at Shadow Moses Island during the terrorist takeover. Debbie Mae West handled the voice acting for her, bringing an innocent yet capable sound to Meryl, embodying her as a woman struggling with her own past of chasing dreams she's not even sure she wants. As mentioned earlier, she is also the niece of Colonel Roy Campbell. Well, actually she's his daughter, but I don't think that's revealed until way later. And although it is thought at first that her being stationed at Shadow Moses was a mere coincidence, it's also later revealed to have been planned so that the Secretary of Defense would have leverage over Campbell in order to force him to withhold vital information from Snake. Her role in the game becomes larger as Snake begins to develop feelings for her and she him. You might also recognize Debbie as the English voice actress for Tsunade from Naruto. Hal Emmerich, aka Otacon. Bringing to life our favorite engineer/otaku, Christopher Randolph embraces the nerd-like soft-spoken attitude and mannerisms of Hal, depicting him as an innocent but brilliant person. Otacon just wants to help and feels a desire to atone for what he did by bringing Metal Gear to life. Otacon was scouted and hired by an arms tech defense contractor and stationed at Shadow Moses Island before the terrorist takeover. And while at Shadow Moses, Otacon became the lead engineer for Metal Gear Rex, but was manipulated to believe that his work was designing Metal Gear to be a mobile defense system. He was totally unaware that he was creating a walking nuclear missile launcher. He also developed the state-of-the-art stealth camouflage technology that was later adopted by the US military and we see in the game. Liquid Snake. Voiced beautifully by Cam Clarke, Liquid Snake has a British tint to his accent due to the years he spent in the UK both as a child and following his teenage years. Clarke plays Liquid Snake as a sophisticated but emotionally passionate counterpart to Solid's more stoic demeanor. I've been over his character extensively already in this video, so we'll just move on. The operations team. I'm going to cover Snake's whole operation team in one section, so here we go. Roy Campbell is, as stated earlier, Snake's mission handler on this operation. He is voiced so iconically by Paul Edding that I literally cannot hear his voice in anything else without pointing out to my friends, dude, that's Colonel Campbell. Next up is our geneticist and nanotechnology specialist, Naomi Hunter. You might be wondering how I've managed to go this entire video without mentioning her yet, given how intrinsically crucial she is to the game, and I'm going to make up for that now. Naomi is voiced by Jennifer Hale, who you may have heard of before given she's arguably the most recognized female voice talent in the industry. Her character is not only the one who injects the nanomachines into Snake while knowing she has poisoned him with the Fox Die virus and withheld that information from him, she's also the adopted sister of Gray Fox, and a double agent who secretly wants to see Snake killed here at Shadow Moses, blaming him for killing her brother during their fight at Zanzibar Land. I didn't bring this up yet because it's kind of convoluted and she doesn't contribute very much to the overall plot beyond her significance to Fox Die. She herself is a crucial character and has some of the most voice acting in the game, as she's supposed to be advising and assisting Snake on his mission until she's later revealed to be a traitor, for which she is arrested, but she does admit guilt before that happens and apologizes to Snake for her actions, admitting she was wrong. Now we can't forget Mei Ling, voiced by Kim My Guest. She is Snake's data analyst and also something of a philosopher. Whenever the player needs to save their game data, they call Mei Ling. After calling her, she normally has a profound quote of some kind to deliver to the player, oftentimes being applicable to how they can play the game. Next up is Master Miller, also voiced by Cam Clarke, who pulled double duty on this character. Master Kazuhira Miller often trained Alaskan field soldiers in his free time, but before that he assisted Snake during his mission in Zanzibar Land, calling him and providing useful information on the field. Unfortunately, Miller was murdered and Liquid Snake impersonated him during the events of Shadow Moses. Miller, of course, has massive significance in later releases, but let's keep it relevant to this one. The last member of the team, and my favorite, is Nastasha Romanenko, whom you can actually play through the entire game without ever seeing or hearing from once. No, really. I'd wager like half the people who played this game didn't even know she existed, maybe more, which is both insane and a shame, because she actually has a lot of good dialogue throughout the game. Voiced by Renee Raudman, Nastasha is a Ukrainian-Russian nuclear weapons and firearms expert. Snake can call on her to get information on all kinds of weapons, items, or different parts of the environment in the game. She's got great dialogue too, which I recommend checking out if you play the game. Campbell gives you her codec frequency one time in the beginning, don't miss it. She also has the most ambiguous background of all the characters in this game, since there's conflicting stories regarding what exactly her past is. Let's talk about Gray Fox, real name Frank Yeager, who also adopts the codename Deep Throat during the Shadow Moses incident. I wish I was kidding. He calls himself Deep Throat in the game until you find out who he really is. I get that it's a reference to the Watergate whistleblower, but come on. Anyway, he's voiced very well by Greg Eagles, but potentially, I actually think he was miscast. He does the lines very well, but this voice...
Snake, watch out. That place is filled with gas. Also, the floor is electrified.
...does not line up with this picture. I think he did a very good job though, and it's definitely a memorable performance. His inclusion in the story places him as sort of a wild card, a wrench in the gears if you will. He's on nobody's side. Rather, he has followed Snake here to have one final fight with him following his crippling defeat to Snake during the events of Zanzibar Land. He sees Snake as a friend, and that's why he helps him throughout the Shadow Moses incident, and also ends up sacrificing his life to save Snake from Metal Gear Rex in the end. His desire to fight Snake is one of honor rather than malice. I actually like how he fits into everything, throwing everyone off. Even the villains themselves don't know what to think when he shows up. And lastly, you have the Sons of Big Boss. This is the name our ex-Foxhound unit members took to rebrand themselves after defecting and taking Shadow Moses hostage. Let's list them off. Decoy Octopus. Sharing a voice actor with Gray Fox, Greg Eagles also pulls double duty here. Although we never truly hear the DARPA chief, one of Octopus's abilities was directly imitating the voice of his victim, so we can reasonably assume that this is what he sounded like. So in a weird way, Greg Eagles kind of voices 3 characters in Metal Gear Solid. The next character is arguably more central to the Metal Gear franchise than Solid Snake himself, voiced in this title by Patrick Zimmerman. Revolver Ocelot is an ex-Soviet soldier, a master of torture and interrogation, and a crack-shot sharpshooter with his single-action army revolvers. He is Liquid Snake's right-hand man, and the only boss that doesn't die at Shadow Moses. As for Zimmerman's performance, the way he says, "the greatest handgun ever made," was enough to have me and my brother quoting it for our entire lives since this game. Then we've got Vulcan Raven, voiced by Peter Lurie. He is a native Alaskan American. Having been raised as a shaman, he is in touch with special spiritual capabilities. Psycho Mantis is a psychic soldier who can read minds and even brainwash some people into doing his bidding. Although powerful, Mantis is a follower by nature, and he has allied himself with Liquid Snake's cause during the Shadow Moses incident, where of course he meets his demise. Mantis is voiced by Doug Stone, and his over-the-top performance is just insanely memorable. From the way he judges the player on how capable they are, based on the amount of deaths on their save file, to the way he points out whether or not they've played Castlevania. I can't get enough of it. It's unfortunate that we really don't get very much of this character in this game. Lastly, we have Sniper Wolf, voiced by Tasia Valenza. Her performance brings a somber but salacious tone to the character. She and Otacon seem to have a bit of a love thing going on, which brings a level of tension between he and Snake when Snake has to fight her to the death. Something to note about Metal Gear Solid's voice cast is that each voice actor was told to go extra hard on their performances. This is because the character models were all polygonal, so the emotional push needed to come from the voices. Each character had to be audibly distinct in order to separate and make it easier to discern who is talking, since, you couldn't see their lips moving. Unfortunately, this led to a hard trial for David Hayter to reprise his role as Snake after Metal Gear Solid. He was forced to re-audition for the character every single time. Despite being so iconic, he was basically synonymous with the character at this point. I don't know that I can confirm this or not, but the rumor is that Kojima actually wanted to replace Hayter for quite some time, potentially due to how exaggerated his voice for Snake was in the games. Now, I'm not sure if that's true, but this is what I've heard. Regardless of that, Hayter's delivery as Snake in this game was so perfectly spot on that no matter what happens, I'm not sure any Solid Snake will ever be accepted as such without the involvement of David Hayter. And this is pretty much how it should be. Thank you, David. I don't really think there's a good way to talk about Metal Gear Solid without addressing its numerous fourth wall breaks, especially given just how well known it is for them. Kojima tends to treat the fourth wall more like a curtain. Rather than a solid force to keep the player sternly separated from the story to ensure preservation of suspension of disbelief, he puts up a curtain which he occasionally likes to pull back just a little bit so that the player and the story can see each other. Now, despite what some people might think, suspension of disbelief is actually insanely crucial to keeping a good story good, and I normally really do not like any kind of fourth wall break, but not because they aren't ever fun, but rather because no one seems to be able to do them very well. There's good ways to do it, and then there's bad ways to do it. Kojima really loves playing with that fourth wall barrier, but most of the time he does it in such a charming way it tends to add to the experience rather than detract from it. This is because, as I said earlier, he treats that barrier more like a curtain than a wall, so when it's removed, it's far less abrasive and pretentious than when I've seen other properties doing it. And when Metal Gear Solid does it, it so rarely jeopardizes the game's own tone and willingness to take its own story seriously. Metal Gear Solid knows when to poke fun at itself, but unlike so many modern properties that break their fourth wall, I don't think Metal Gear Solid does this in a demeaning way. It knows it's a little silly, but also still wants to take itself seriously. Let's go over just a few of my favorites found in the halls of Shadow Moses. The most memorable fourth wall break for me is the all too infamous CD case break, wherein the player reaches a point in the game where Snake has to call Meryl to progress. Doing so is impossible, however, without her codec frequency number. So Colonel Campbell tells Snake that if he can find her frequency number on the back of the CD case, he can call her. There is no CD case in the game. I can recall as an 8-year-old child watching my older brother play this game and thinking to myself, it had to be the optical disc, right? The item you get a little earlier that's just plot relevant? I was sure it was something to do with that item, but I couldn't figure out what to do. We ended up deciding the game was glitched and restarted from the beginning. Well, obviously nothing changed on the second playthrough, so we gave up. I remember roughly 2 weeks later, I was looking at the real physical CD case for Metal Gear Solid, while being bored and looking for something to play with, and wouldn't you know it, that moment of realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. In front of me, on the back, was Meryl's codec number, staring right at me. I immediately told my brother, we tried it, and we were able to beat the game shortly after that. This is very much so indicative of the type of moments that this game is littered with, but it's also my favorite. The game commonly treats the fourth wall like it's not a thing, talking directly to the player about saving his game, which buttons to press to perform actions, etc. The most egregious instance of this, and if you've played this game you'll know exactly where I'm going with this, the notorious controller port event, as talked about earlier in his boss battle panel, Psycho Mantis.
I've got it. Use the controller port. Plug your controller into controller port 2. If you do that, he won't be able to read your mind.
Kojima is well known for his love of dancing across the lines of that fourth wall, and Psycho Mantis is the embodiment of fourth wall breaking characters in this game. Most of the time, when a movie or a comic or a game breaks the fourth wall, I'm actually a little annoyed by it. But it's not because I don't find fourth wall breaks amusing or charming, it's because I really hate it when I'm trying to take a story somewhat seriously, and then the story itself mocks me for it. I don't know, that kind of sucks. So I really appreciate that this game pokes fun at itself, and you feel kind of like you're in on the joke, rather than the game making fun of you for taking it seriously. I hate it when properties do that. So as far as fourth wall breaks go, this game is kind of a masterclass. Like, if someone is wanting to write a story that kind of breaks the fourth wall, I would say look to this game as the example. When Metal Gear Solid breaks the fourth wall, it does so with some class. It doesn't jeopardize its own story, and it doesn't cause the characters or the player to stop taking the story seriously in any way. Maybe it affected some people like that, but clearly not everybody, given the fan base of this game, and clearly not me, given how much I like it. There's not much more to say than that, but I couldn't consider this an appropriately done retrospective if I hadn't at least talked about this element that led to Metal Gear Solid becoming so famous. Breaking the fourth wall is just part of the DNA of the Metal Gear Solid franchise. You could say it's part of its legacy. If everything I've talked about so far was the sum of Metal Gear Solid's package, it would have been more than enough to justify this game as a masterpiece. However, there was an additional game mode included for players to sink their teeth into. VR training missions are a series of 10 increasingly challenging levels designed to train and familiarize players with the gameplay mechanics found in the main campaign. After completing these 10 levels, the player is introduced to a timed version of the levels wherein they can hone and practice their skills, learn the layout of each level, and eventually attain the top score for each level, which I did. I'm not going to talk about the expansion pack release called VR Missions, since it was sold on its own disc and isn't technically part of the base Metal Gear Solid offering. It's its own game. Just the built-in VR training missions. Let's break down the different levels and modes on offer here. When you first boot up the VR missions menu, your only available option is going to be to play through the levels as is. No timer or variables, just complete each level without being caught. The purpose of this, as said before, is to familiarize the player with the game's mechanics and expectations. After you are able to complete all 10 levels, you unlock Time Attack, an advanced mode that has you play through the missions without being seen yet again, but this time competing against 10 set high scores to see where you line up. Trust me, it's a little bit harder than you might think. Then you have a third mode that has you play through those same 10 missions yet again, only this time with weapons you have to use to kill every soldier before you can progress to the next level. Lastly, for Maximized Challenge, you have to do all 10 missions without being spotted while killing every guard while on a timer that carries over from mission to mission. You're given 8 minutes to complete all 10 missions, which might sound easy if you're seeing how fast I'm completing these missions, but trust me, it is a lot harder than you think. I gave up beating this final mode because I got so fed up with it. But it can be a fun challenge for those who might be interested. Let's do a level by level breakdown. The first level is absolutely iconic if you played the game growing up. It is a single straight hallway with 2 indentations to play it safe and hide in between looks. Or if you're a more experienced player, you can just run straight past him to the goal, or kill him right away if you're playing gun mode. Mission 2 has 4 evenly spaced blocks and 4 guards all facing the outward directions. The guards will begin moving on their routes, and then we have to take them out one by one before progressing to the next missions. Mission 3 is going to make us be creative. In stealth mode, you can just crawl under this hole, but in gun mode, we have to knock on the wall to lure the guards out. Fairly simple level layout, just 3 halls basically. The trick is putting these guards down quickly. Mission 4 is where some trial and error might start coming into play. The guards are a bit more spread out, but move around more, so you have to try and play around with the routes and learn what their patterns are. Mission 5 introduces a stealth element that is crucial to be considered when you get into the game's story mode: noise. And by that I mean these glowing panels cause noise that can alert the guards to your position, so taking them out without being heard is imperative. This mission is actually a lot easier in the standard stealth mode than it is in gun mode, I think. Mission 6 also introduces a pretty critical stealth element that players will need to be aware of in the game, and that is surveillance cameras. Placed pretty perfectly with the minimal loss of coverage, the player will have to take his time and learn the gaps, so he can more efficiently complete the level. However, there are also guards patrolling, which further complicates the paths available. Great level design, love it. Mission 7 is brilliant, and I found it to be the second hardest level to confront. It's so simple too. A flat space with 8 waist-high blocks laid out evenly across the map. The stealth version took me forever to pin down. I struggled to figure out exactly how to get past. Gun mode makes this a lot easier though, for obvious reasons. Mission 8 introduces us to footprint tracking via snow effects, which is fun to play with, but other than that, it's the same as the other levels, with the exception that you can use footprint tracking to lure these guards in circles. Mission 9 tries to mix up the formula by expanding the length of the map and making the player deal with a more open area. However, it just ends up being a big hallway with a big box at the end. Easier than Mission 8 by a lot, in my opinion. And finally, we have Mission 10. This level puts everything you've learned into one final level. Significantly bigger and more complicated than the other levels, you have to dodge spotlights, surveillance cameras, and armed guards. Pretty much the works. There's all kinds of avenues to get around this map, but you have to consider the fastest routes if you're going for the higher score. In gun mode, the level turns out to be even bigger than you initially think because it goes off to a second floor that I didn't even see on my first 2 playthroughs until I had to go up there to kill a guard in order to advance and win. Kojima's team did not need to put this much effort into what is essentially a glorified tutorial game mode. It becomes its own arcade-like companion mode after you complete it the first time and adds more playtime into an already fairly long game. As mentioned before, these VR training missions got so popular it warranted a spin-off expansion pack called Metal Gear Solid VR Missions, which was its own disc for the PlayStation 1 and sold fairly well. It also featured a host of way more complicated and expanded upon levels for players to engage with. Although it's something of a lesser-known gem, VR training missions would go on to become something of a staple in the Metal Gear Solid titles, even appearing in the popular spin-off title Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Not to mention the existence of these levels is actually canon to the in-game universe, and goes on to play a fairly pivotal role in the plot of the game's sequel, Sons of Liberty. A dissection on the differences between Metal Gear Solid and the Twin Snakes would be an entire video in its own right. It is, however, a critical part of this game's existence, so in order to maintain a comprehensive retrospective, I'm going to briefly touch on it and run down a few of the biggest differences, and also answer which one I think you should play. Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes is a ground-up remake of the original Metal Gear Solid using the engine and technological advancements from the game's own sequel, Sons of Liberty. It was released as a GameCube exclusive in 2004 and never revisited for an HD remaster like some of the other titles were. First off, should you play the remake or the original? Well, if you're new to the series, or even if you've only played some of the later games and are hoping to get into some of the earlier titles, the original one is the one I recommend playing if you've never played the first game before. But the remake is not bad. I wouldn't even say it's poorly done. I just think it takes way too many liberties with the game's story, characters, and especially its overall tone.
Don't move!
It's definitely worth playing though if you've already played and beaten the original before, because The Twin Snakes is a really interesting title, and it's pretty fun in its own right. I do think it's really a treat to see the iconic events from the first game played out in better graphical fidelity and to hear different takes on the original game's dialogue, because all of the voice lines have been totally re-recorded for this game. Unfortunately, in most ways, the voice acting is worse, but I don't think it's ever outright bad. The game is a great companion piece to the mainline entries, but that is all that it is. The Twin Snakes should not be used as a supplement to the original. As silly as the original is, the Twin Snakes takes that silly factor and dials it up to 12.
Come, let's fight!
Everything about this game is way bigger and far more over the top than the game it is attempting to recreate, which is a double-edged sword in my opinion, because although that means this remake totally fails to capture the charm that made the original so great, it also gives it this bizarre new charm of its own that is still very much so worth experiencing for fans of the series. I once heard the Twin Snakes described as the events of Shadow Moses being told from Otacon's perspective, while the original is what really happened. So like if Otacon were to try to tell Sonny or someone like that the story, in his head, he probably saw Snake as some kind of superhero, which is how Snake is depicted in this remake. My mind always comes back to this scene. In the original, when Ocelot fires a bullet at Snake's feet as a warning shot, Snake leaps back into the air to avoid the ricochet. In the Twin Snakes, he does an outright acrobatic backflip, something you'd see in an anime, which, of course, Otacon readily admits he is a massive fan of. And I really think it holds up, considering the only thing Otacon actually saw firsthand was Snake fist-fighting a cyborg ninja, which is one of the things I think the new cutscenes does really well. Watching their fight feels probably pretty accurate to what would have happened, but then again, that's what Otacon would have actually seen, so it makes sense. Compare this to Snake's final fight with Liquid at the end, and it looks more like something from the Matrix than a Metal Gear game. There's some moves Snake does that look like how he fights using CQC, but then they start doing flying jump kicks too. This theory is perhaps most substantiated by the scene where Snake gets taken prisoner. In the original, some soldiers get the drop on him and he puts his hands up and goes peacefully, because he's outgunned. In the Twin Snakes, however, he does this. I really love the fan theory that this whole game is just Otacon's memory of the Shadow Moses incident, and that the original PS1 title is the real account. Otacon couldn't fathom Snake getting captured so easily because he doesn't fully understand the grim reality of how warfare works. No soldier, not even a trained one, would do something like this. Even Snake's dialogue is a lot more empathetic and less cold in the remake, because that's how Otacon sees Snake. A hero, but a reluctant one. Whereas in reality, Snake is not an anime hero. He's just an old killer with a conscience. I'd like to make it clear that I don't think the remake is bad. I actually think it's really good, and definitely a fun play, but it should be seen as a treat for fans of the series, not an alternative route for people to experience the story of Shadow Moses. That being said, I do think that the Twin Snakes makes a great addition to the franchise's library of games. The impact of Metal Gear Solid cannot be overstated. So many games have spawned from this one title, and I would wager hundreds of other non-related games have taken massive amounts of inspiration from the work that Kojima and his team put into this game. Even as far as referencing Metal Gear in other games like Assassin's Creed, an Easter egg that Kojima and his team would later go on to pay back in one of their own games. But just Metal Gear Solid, the story of Shadow Moses, helped shift the entire video gaming scene. For many, this was the game that opened eyes to the genre's capability to be something more than just a pastime for children. The drama, the action, the intensity, all of it left a long-lasting mark on the people fortunate enough to get to play it. Even within its own universe, the Shadow Moses incident would go on to become the crux of other crucial plot points throughout the series, from being a core theme in Sons of Liberty to an emotional story beat in the fourth game, Guns of the Patriots. The events of this game are coded into the DNA of not only this franchise, but so many other games that have grown atop the shoulders of this gaming giant. The story itself has even seen 2 different novelizations by different authors, and is supposedly getting a live-action adaptation starring Oscar Isaac. At the time of writing this, however, that has not happened. The theme of the story, however, ties back to the narrative, and that is legacy. Kojima may not have realized at the time just how influential and well-received Metal Gear Solid was going to be when he was making it, and yet, here we are. It is perhaps most saddening and yet somehow fitting that the franchise would end so unresolved. I'm referring, of course, to The Phantom Pain, which was released too early and subsequently had to cut the entire third chapter from the game. They just ended up releasing some of the footage as bonus footage of what could have been, leaving behind a Phantom Pain of its own in the wake of the game's release. But all of that aside, Metal Gear Solid remains to this date one of the single greatest PlayStation titles ever made, and I don't think it was incorrect of me to refer to it in the thumbnail as PlayStation's greatest masterpiece. A game that has been very important to me over the years, influencing me in ways I didn't even recognize until I got older. The importance of strength and persistence, the value of legacy, themes I have learned to incorporate into my own life as an adult. It makes us think about what we want to pass on, consider our own actions, and dwell on how they will shape our future. Because as this game tells us, at the end, we have to live and love and pass on our genes. The game itself went on to spread its genes, its memes, into other games. Its messaging can go further. At the end of the game, Snake talked about how before Shadow Moses, he'd only ever lived for himself. His so-called heroic actions were really just him trying to feel alive. Yet at the end, Snake decided he wants to change that. He decided that a life of selfishness and self-indulgence is rejecting your obligation to both your predecessors and successors, though he says so in fewer words. He says that going forward, he wants to start living for others, living and fighting for the future, not just his own, but everyone's, because that's the legacy he's been left, and it's the one he wants to leave behind, because that's what this game and this franchise is about at its core. Metal Gear is about legacy. Thank you so much to everyone who watched this video. I know it was a long one, and trust me, it took even longer to make. This was a passion project through and through, and I was really excited to immerse myself into the whole long-form retrospective video scene. Although this was an immense amount of work to create, I think I really loved the process of making it. All the same, I wouldn't expect to see another one this long for a while. The script ended up being 50 pages long, and while I did love creating this video, there are not many games I like enough to spend that kind of time dissecting them in this kind of comprehensive way. That being said, if the algorithm loves this video and I see a desire for more, Sons of Liberty will definitely be getting the same treatment. But when that will happen is really hard to say, just know that it's on my radar and something I'd like to do. And thank you to all of the people who keep coming back for my video essay content. As always, I have a lot of things you can check out in my Linktree, most exciting of which is probably my graphic comic book series, which you can read for free over on readcharnelhouse.com or rednile.com. Also, there's a link to my Spotify where you'll find my original music. It's Argent Metal, so very inspired by the Doom 2016 Doom Eternal soundtracks. And of course, my merch store where you can find a lot of fun and cool t-shirt designs, some video gamey looking designs, and some stuff associated with my music and other projects. The kind of shirts I like to wear, so I hope you like them as well. That's all from me, so until I see you next time, my name is Evan, and thank you all so much for watching.